same Pixar that would dominate theatrical animation in the 2000s would appear to have been losing steam towards the end of the 2010s as other companies gained notoriety for producing quality work. Even in retrospective efforts, movies like The Good Dinosaur have been viewed negatively, a movie directed by the creator of Elemental, Peter Sohn. However, this movie might be the one to prove the internet wrong for being too harsh on its early material, because it's pretty good. Spoilers, by the way. Granted, this isn't a direct knock on the reaction I've seen online, as this happens with a lot of early material. People generally expect a lot from original stories. And in fairness, this did appear to be two things that weren't giving it much hope. The first part is that it appeared to be a simple love story race allegory, and we'll get to how well it did soon. The second part is that it appeared more as a tech demo than a fleshed out world. Let's start here. The world was lovely, giving me an almost solar punk vibe. The city was clearly built without fire elements in mind, and that comes up a lot in the main story. Within the movie, they make it clear that Ember's family moving to Elemental City was met with the other elements not being so welcoming, meaning that they had to carve out a place for themselves in a rather unkempt part of town. As Ember explores the city outside of their enclave, we see that she's often having to consciously make adjustments to how she moves in fear of being put out. That being said, there were a lot of shots where this movie needing over 151,000 cores to make made sense. Flowing water here, flowing water there. A lot of this movie's animation philosophy core clearly had to do with fluid dynamics. While it was fun to see, I'm interested to see if the composition holds up over time as technology gets better and better, and the previous things that were tried with technology look less and less impressive over time, as there weren't a lot of moments where Ember or Wade felt like their movements had that Pixar magic of feeling creative, innovative, and unique per character. Once you've seen Wade appear out of water the first time, the fifth time isn't really that interesting to see. Not only that, but given that there's a lot of scenes that happen around water, Ember is limited story-wise to only have so much movement. While rare, I enjoyed seeing the Cyclone Stadium, and it was a shame that we don't get to see much of the earth and wind elements the way that we do with fire and water. While rushing water does play a large focus within the story, I can see how one may look at its significance in the movie and think about how the technology may have inspired the story rather than the other way around, as they claim with their designs. The love story race allegory part was heavy-handed, but listening to people speak about it, I see that this was to be expected going in. Was Wade charming and did he win me over? Yes. Was Ember an engaging main character who are going to see get with Wade? Yes. In that aspect, I think the movie did rather well. I would be lying to you though if I told you that this was the most interesting or emotionally investing part of the movie for me. To me, the love aspect comes in third place, as while I am a sucker for relationships and I definitely enjoyed what Pixar has done in the past in that area, this didn't do too much for me. I did enjoy select scenes quite a bit, such as Ember meeting Wade's family, Wade helping Ember see her favorite flower, and even their dance afterwards. This is gonna sound weird, but Wade seemed a little too mature for how goofy and sappy he was. Like, there'd be times where I'd be interested in seeing Ember and Wade work through not just love, but inter-elemental love, and Wade would appear to have the answer immediately. And that played into the heavy-handed aspect that kind of turned me away from this aspect of the movie. I wish he was more vague, unsure, inexperienced until it mattered, but he seemed to pretty much be developed in a way where he pretty much carried Ember over the finish line when it came to the love story. In that aspect, it wasn't interesting because it felt like I wasn't watching two characters figure their feelings out together, but rather one character figure out their feelings and the other one pretty much coaxing the other one into the most satisfactory ending for the viewer. I suppose the element allegory was fine. I hope it reaches and impacts whoever it was intended for, but there were just a lot of aspects here that made me disconnect from it. Notably, because this is a movie made for children, they could never really dive into it to make it emotionally gripping in the way an allegory like this could go. Not only this, but I wish we dove into more of the non-fire elements perspectives, because it opens up conversations that normally aren't had. Why are the xenophobic people xenophobic in the first place? Following the allegory, surely this viewpoint was passed from somewhere, and in this long game of telephone of why the fire people should be avoided, we don't get to see much of why. We see why when it comes to Ember's father and his perspective of water elements, as Wade and Ember had a hand in destroying the basement of his shop, the shop that he worked so hard for. To me, Ember's father taking out his animosity of water people on Wade, while problematic in story, was a very important and interesting aspect to the movie. I just wish the opposite was shown, especially when it came to the leak. Within the movie, they had two solutions to fixing up the leak of the dam. The first was using cement bags, and the second was using glass. Both of these had to do with Ember, yet she receives no blame for this. In fact, Wade takes the blame for the cement bags. These things were also Ember's fault, a fire element which could have legitimized the irrational hatred and or fear towards fire elements. In the movie tripping over and trying to show you that fire and water can mix within society, if it just spent 10% of that movie showcasing the uncomfortable life and reputation that fire people as a whole have to go through, it would have made Ember and Wade's romantic efforts feel a lot more daring. Given that Wade's family is supportive, and a lot of the people that we see end up being supportive, it makes the scattered moments of societal pressure on fire elements seem out of place, when that's a big aspect as to why the story exists in the first place. However, the most interesting aspect to this movie was the generational shift between how it is implied that Bernie's parents treated him versus how he treats Ember. Bernie is Ember's father. Given that he moved to the big city with the love of his life, with his parents, notably his father, not being supportive of that move, and carve out not just a family, but an entire neighborhood and culture and just people that know him and his family very well, wanting to pass on his legacy to his one and only daughter was very heartwarming. Maybe it's because before the movie they showcased Carl's Date, which is a Pixar short revolving around the Up universe, but I really empathize with Ember's father and the whole aging aspect a lot more than Ember herself. In addition to the big risk, he's constantly shown to not be able to perform at the level he once did in upkeeping the shop. I honestly thought he was not gonna make it towards the end of the movie. To me, Ember's apprehension on her attraction to Wade because of her father's history and journey surpassed any emotional investment in the race allegory or even the love story itself. I love the way he eventually handled that situation, and that scene where they speak through her truth of not wanting to run the shop anymore. It was just the best scene in the movie. It reminded me a lot about what I liked in Turning Red and what Turning Red wanted to do with the whole generational shift. Except I would argue in that movie it was not only handled better, but the non-generational shift scenes were handled better. And that's why I would argue that this movie was just good, not great, because this element, pun intended, of the story was only a medium aspect in the grander story he wanted to tell that largely just felt fine. Nothing spectacular, but nothing horrible either, and definitely nothing to have worried about for so long. However, this was the aspect of the movie I enjoyed the most, personally, because it made me feel. And I'm definitely relieved that I wasn't too harsh on the film and its marketing efforts, because I do think that Elemental proved the internet wrong. It's not that bad.